Okay, we are back. My computer's mad at me, and I believe it's mad at me because. Oh wait, I'm not on. Okay. My computer's mad at me, and I believe it's mad at me because I actually had a client before this, and like poor planning on my part. It was just working on overdrive and overtime, and it was not happy with me. So hopefully things are better. I had to shut it down and wait. Anyway, I don't even want to talk about all the computer stuff that happened. Let me just make sure my volume is up, everything up. We're good to go. We're good to go. Thank you for your patience. But sometimes these things happen. They happen, right? Technical difficulties happen. I'm like, is Mercury retrograding? Anybody tell me in the comments, is Mercury retrograding? Because there's a lot of technical stuff. But truth be told, I was overworking my computer. It got mad at me and it was like, I ain't gonna do nothing. Okay. And I don't blame it. But we're here now. Again, thank you for your patience. And I'm glad that we can actually have this live because I think it's going to be a great conversation. Okay. And if you're part of the replay gang, just let me know in the comments below that you're watching on the replay. And if you're part of the live right now, say hello in the chat. Taking a deep breath as I transition into this space. All right, beautiful people, welcome back. And if you're landing here for the first time, I'm really glad that you did. You'll see me go back and forth. I've got another monitor here just to make sure I'm checking in to see that things are moving on that side of town. And then I'll also be looking over here. So that's why my head is going to be bopping around. But this is the final episode in a four-part series called The Paradox of Purpose. And I think it might be the most important one, right? And so if you didn't catch the other three episodes, it's okay. You can go back and watch those, but I think this episode stands alone, so pretty well. So we're going to be talking about what no one tells you about living without a life plan. If we notice about the times now, everybody had a plan, and all of it is blowing up in some shape or form. So if that's you, if you had a life plan and things just aren't working out the way that you thought, then you're going to appreciate this episode. Um, let's see. What's going on, Toya? Hello, hello. All right. So I'm going to summarize our journey in a minute, but if you have been chasing purpose one way or another, or chasing kind of like what it is that you want to do in your life, um, and maybe you've let go of that chase and you're in a space to receive whatever message that you need to receive. And maybe now you're kind of at a standstill and you're like, but what comes next? And that's really the part that most people aren't really prepared for. How to live when you're no longer striving to figure everything out, but you're also not disengaged, right? You're not chasing some big purpose anymore, but you haven't yet rebuilt a life that feels meaningful without the chase. And so being in that space can feel pretty disorienting. You're functioning, right? You're present as much as you can be, but underneath all of that, there's still a bit of unsettledness, right? There's a bit of uneasiness going on, and maybe some thoughts are popping up like, am I doing enough right now? Am I missing something? Should I be having a lot more clarity than I should have? Like, should I have all this clarity by now? And so this episode is really about what integration actually looks like, not as a form of an idea, but as a lived experience. And what I mean by integration is like, how do we integrate all of the things that we have learned? And how do we begin to embody some of those things, right? How do we take all those little pieces and, yeah, just embody them? And so I think I went through the whole process of ensuring that like purpose is not some curated idea, right? That we often project. But integration is really about the lived experience of making decisions from clarity, not from pressure, of staying engaged with your life without needing every step to serve some sort of bigger narrative, right? Ooh, I'm starting to squeeze hot. Sure about a napkin. So I'm in Massachusetts right now, and 1 minute it's raining. Like it's been raining nonstop. Not to talk about the weather, but and then boom, today it's like 90 degrees. I'm like, what is going on? I can't keep up. But so one thing about clarity that I think often confuses us, we think that clarity just has to come. If I have clarity, then I can move, then I could take action. And clarity rarely comes first. In fact, it doesn't. It actually reveals itself through participation, through rhythm, through repetition, through the way that you chose to show up, even when you're not sure what any of it means yet. And so just drop an emoji in the chat if you've ever felt like you're in that in between space called the liminal space, the void, where you're unbecoming the old version of yourself, but you're not quite where you'd like to be, but you're also done chasing. But you're also not really sure how to live without that chase. So let me know in the comments if that is you. You could drop an emoji, anything like that, or in the chat. So in episode 1, we sort of explored why chasing purpose doesn't exist, doesn't work. I mean, oh, there's a nice breeze coming in. Oh. And how the pressure to figure it out, right, actually can create more confusion. And so we reframed purpose as something that emerges from being, not from striving. And so in episode 2, then we shifted the focus inward. So instead of seeking answers out there, which is what we've been taught to do, we sort of explored, how purpose begins with listening to your own life, listening to your own patterns, your own inner voice, and what all that is saying, what life is sort of trying to tell you in the midst of it all. We've been conditioned to seek out the things that we need externally, and that creates a lot of conflict and chaos. Let's check the chat. All right. What's going on, Nisa? Nisa says, me for sure. So as you can see, we're not alone in this. We're not alone in this. We all are sort of going through it, different intensities, in different ways, but it's pretty universal in a sense. And so now in this final episode, we're talking about integration again, what it actually looks like to live without chasing purpose, without disconnecting from your life, how to sort of rebuild rhythms and make aligned choices and actually stay engaged, even when things feel unclear. Because often when things feel unclear, we shut down, we distract, then we get further and further away, then we beat ourselves up about it, and then the cycle continues, right? And if that sounds like it's something that's relatable, let me know in the chat. Again, if you missed the previous episodes, I'll link them below and you could check them out later. I mean, they're not that long. They're like 10 minutes each, I think, or something like that. Maybe 10, 13 minutes each. But either way, you're in the right place. You don't necessarily have to go watch all those episodes to get what you're going to get out of this episode here. All right, so you've let go maybe of the chase if you're here. If you're not here, it's okay. You'll get something out of this episode. So you started to sort of unravel the pressure to find a big, definitive purpose, right? And I have a client, and I'll probably bring up some client stories as we talk alongside with my own personal challenges. But I have a client who's like, he's just looking for like that big thing that has all the meaning, that it makes everything click. I'm like, you're going to be waiting for a long time. If you're waiting for that big existential connection, you're going to wait a long time. So that's something that he's working through, and we're working through it together. And so as you're sort of waiting for that big definitive purpose, some, questions start to kind of creep in, right? Now that I'm no longer striving for a thing, how do I live without feeling directionless? And so this is what this final episode is going to help you sort of figure out in a little bit. So, and I remember this for myself because when I had, some of you are new here and some of you know my story, but I always go back to it because it's a lot of it is pretty relevant. And I talk about the things that I share with you are the things that I've actually experienced myself. And when I kind of like left everything, like I left my job, just kind of, I bought a one-way ticket, went to Thailand, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I started teaching English. Was teaching English a life plan for me? No, it was never in the cards. But I was in a place where I felt pretty like this. I felt kind of, I didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of was just going with the flow of life, but I also felt a bit directionless. And when I got to the East and all those distractions disappeared, I was like, I had this really emotional crises at the time because I started to look around me and I was in the midst of all these 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds who just graduated college, and their parents bought them a ticket to go teach English overseas and find themselves. And here I was 35 at the time, and I was like, am I having a midlife crisis? So I was going through some things at that time, and I felt pretty aimless. But I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna trust this process and see where this takes me. And check your comments here. I'll be happy to land on a thing for 3 to 6 months at this point. Listen, I'm with you. I'm with you. I don't even know what next year holds. I have an idea for the rest of the year, but I'm not like tied to it. So I totally get that feeling, and that I'm gonna touch upon that as well, Anissa. But so in this final episode, we're actually going to look into what it means to sort of rebuild your daily life, your routines, your choices, your sense of direction without relying on achievement or being productive to feel like you're on track. And a lot of my clients are going through this right now because a lot of them have built such structured lives and have excelled in many different ways. And now all of that is coming down because they're not the same person. And it's like, how do you deal with that conflict? The former version of you, the life that you built that is connected to that former version, and the other one that's sort of trying to emerge. And we're also going to learn how to make decisions that come from presence, not from pressure, how to stay engaged without needing every step to mean something. When you're trying to journey through this life and you need it to everything to mean something, that's just the ego because ego finds safety in meaning. And if you're constantly looking for that, you're going to be constantly spinning your wheels. And we're also going to discuss how to let meaning emerge through your lived experiences, not through chasing certainty or trying to construct some perfect life plan. Because even when the search ends, right? When I said, okay, I made the decision, I'm going to go teach English. Okay, I got that down. And then it was like, my life is still going, right? So even after the search, your life doesn't end. And if you've been in that space where your old motivations have sort of dropped off, but nothing new has clicked into place yet, this is where we begin to rebuild from something that's way deeper than we thought it was. And there's some practicality that I'll share with you there as well. But the whole thing about this whole, there's a lot of advice out there, right? And the conventional advice says, uh, we're taught to approach it like this: figure out what you want, get clear on your purpose, and then take aligned action. But in reality, that formula keeps a lot of people stuck because the truth is, clarity, again, doesn't usually come before movement. It comes through movement, through participation, through showing up before everything actually makes sense. And it's through that being that everything begins to align. And research supports this too. People report the highest levels of meaning and fulfillment, not when they're chasing some sort of goal or trying to define their identities, but when they're actually fully absorbed in what they're doing and what they're creating. Now, there's this book called Flow. I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Mihai Shiskin Mihai. I don't know how to say his name, but he wrote this book called Flow, The Psychology of Flow. And he says that when your attention is anchored in the moment and your engagement will create its own momentum. We actually are waiting for momentum to magically appear and take us somewhere. But it's through that engagement where that momentum begins to be fueled. But there's a bit of a nuance here. Flow, when you're in flow, it does not require a master plan. It doesn't require you to know where it's all going. It's like an artist on a canvas. Some artists don't know what they're going to create, right? They just kind of let the paint and the brush meet and the canvas, and voila, they create something. And so, this whole journey, what it requires most of all is presence and a willingness, right? And so, one of the things that I was talking to my client about, we had this exact conversation, and he's just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, be present. Like, you have a whole family in his circumstance. How do you just be present with what is currently in front of you? Because the minute that we start chasing something else, we're either fully moving forward, time traveling into the present, or we're actually time traveling backwards. So we're actually not rooted. We're not seeing what is already in front of us, right? And and so conventional advice falls short of that. It tells you to wait until you're certain, to act only once you have a fully defined vision. But what that creates psychologically is paralysis. I know that a lot, especially when like there's a thing I want to create and I don't know quite sure, or there's like this fear in there, and I get stuck in the paralysis. So usually for me, I'm like, I need more information. I gotta gather more information. I'm a data hoarder. And the more information I have, the more likely then I'll feel like I can take action. But all that's doing is like trying to regulate my nervous system. And so when we're in that paralysis, it's your nervous system that has learned that safety comes from control. We're just trying to control the outcome. And so you'll keep waiting for a level of clarity that never arrives, especially not the way that you think it arrives, because you're thinking it needs to look a certain way. And so it might come, but you missed it because there's this perception or perspective that you have of what it's supposed to look like. And so we're not here to chase purpose. We're building a life that creates the conditions for it to emerge. And a lot of people miss that. We want a thing, but we're not creating the conditions for the thing to actually sprout, right? And you could think about this like, let's say if you're, trying to lose weight, part of this process is like you have to clear out your fridge of any temptations, right? You have to create the conditions of the environment for you to actually, go through that journey. And we miss that point. And so a lot of this starts by letting go of the idea that you need to know in order to begin. You don't need to see the whole picture. You don't. That's just fear telling you that you do. You just need to become someone who's in relationship with what's here. And that's going to make sense as we continue. So here's what often goes unspoken when you stop chasing purpose. And if this is landing, definitely let me know in the chat, or if you're part of the replay gang, let me know in the comments. So when you stop chasing purpose, you're no longer striving, but you're still wired to expect direction from pressure, from urgency, or from some sort of outcome. Because if I get the outcome, then I know, all right, I'm going in the right direction, right? And without those familiar drivers, you might start questioning everything if that's not happening. Am I doing enough? Am I still growing? What's guiding me now? And so often a lot of people think like this is a crisis that's about to happen. And it's not necessarily a crisis, it's just an interruption in the process because your system doesn't quite know how to respond yet, your nervous system, because the usual motivators, achievement, goals, validation, aren't calling the shots anymore. And so internally, this can actually feel like a slowdown. And for us, especially if you are part of this sort of matrix conditioning, any kind of slowdown is going to feel like a threat. It's going to overwhelm you because we're not a society that likes to slow down. We're usually not a society that likes to sit still. Okay. Stillness feels like a threat because too much space on our calendars, man, all these limiting beliefs starts to pop up, right? So behaviorally, it might look like hesitation or disengagement, but underneath it, there's something else that's trying to come through, a different way of organizing your life. So integration begins when you stop outsourcing your momentum, right? I need X to happen in order for me to feel Y, right? And so you start asking different questions, not what's the next big thing, right? But what feels most authentic to me right now? What feels most authentic to me? Not how do I prove I'm on the right track or on track, whatever that means to you, but what's worth staying in relationship and connection with, even if no one sees it. Because a lot of the things that we do is because performance. And I'll be weaving that in and out through this live, but we perform a lot. And I know that really well because that was my whole thing, being an immigrant coming to this country and having to perform and not be a quote unquote stereotype that was assumed by where I came from, and hearing it from my family and having to basically be a certain way so that I don't fall into a certain kind of stereotype, right? Having an accent, all those things. And so we have been taught to perform a certain way. So when we go outside, we leave the house, we put on a certain kind of mask, right? And then when we put enough masks, we actually don't know who we are. And I have these conversations with my clients because often they're like, I don't know what my purpose is. I'm like, but do you even know who you are? Like, it's hard for you to even connect to a thing called purpose, which even the word sounds daunting, right? Because it feels like the minute I find this purpose, this thing, like the rest of my life will be saved. Like everything will make sense. There'll be no more pain, no more suffering, and everything's just going to come together. And that's a whole lot of pressure. Whole lot of pressure. My cousin's home, so she's about to run through this and she's going to start talking to me like I'm available to chat. So you'll see that happen in a minute. Anyway, um, where was I? Yeah, so what's worth staying in relationship with even if no one sees it. And so this isn't about detaching, it's about building a new kind of rhythm, one that's guided by internal orientation, values, presence, and self-honesty. And what I mean by internal orientation, I'm talking about coherence, right? When we are incoherent with ourselves, that means everything, mind, body, spirit, all that is in alignment. There's nothing that's kind of out, there's nothing that's fractured. Because often what happens is that we, parts of ourselves over here, parts of ourselves over there, and we're just all over the place. But when we're coherent, it's clear. The channel is very clear. And so, how do you actually rebuild from here without falling back into old patterns or waiting for certainty to arrive? Okay, so that's where we're going next. Let me check the chat. All right. Toy says, I definitely get stuck. Gotta move this right here. Trying to figure out all the things before starting. Yeah, it's very common. We all do that. Because what we're actually trying to do, we're just trying to regulate our nervous systems. We're feeling overwhelmed, we're feeling fear, we're feeling all types of feelings that we're not actually naming. So we do all these kinds of things to help us feel at ease. And so what you're actually saying, Toya, is that I'm trying to feel at ease. I'm trying to feel a sense of safety before I start. And so once we figure out what that is or what's driving that, you won't need to do that anymore. All right. So what does it actually look like to live with purpose and without chasing it? And this is where everything shifts from concept to lived experience. Because even if you've stopped striving on the surface, you may still be using old habits, urgency, productivity, overcommitment to organize your life. And so integration is about interrupting that. How do I put parameters around that? How do I create containers, sacred containers, where that's not going to be interrupted, right? It means creating a different kind of rhythm in your life, not built around outcomes, but from attunement to your values, your body, your energy, and your real time capacity. So we're going to break this down into what that looks like behaviorally, somatically, and even spiritually, because the work isn't just all about mindset, it's literally a full body recalibration, right? So behaviorally, if we were to look at it that way, it's all right. I told him that you're going to be coming through. I told him you're going to be coming through. I'm live. My cousin's home, y'all. And I'm sweating. Let me take a little water. But I'm live. I can't talk to you though. Okay. Yeah. It's okay. My cousin's here, y'all. Anyway. Uh, I'll talk to you later. Okay. Anissa said that data brain massage feels good. It does, right? I'm like, ooh. One thing that I do, and I'll share this with y'all, because ever so often I get into a space where I'm like, I'm all over the place, right? And I'm like, okay, I need a planner. I need some kind of plan, and because I've been running without a planner, like a little agenda, a little like checklist or something. Because sometimes, I have a lot of things going on. I got to keep track of it. And I'll spend like, I did this actually recently because I have a little ADD going on. And I created a whole system. I don't even use it, but it felt good, Anissa. It felt good for me to create this whole system of how I was going to keep track of this and keep track of that. I ain't even use it. Okay. But I knew I needed that little thing. And part of this journey is accepting your process, embracing your process. That is your process. I had a client not too long ago who said, sometimes, now I got to fight with them. You hear them in the background? I'm sorry, y'all. I mean, I'm at my cousin's house. So it's foot traffic here. But yeah, my client was saying, I gotta set the mood before I do things. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like even with the journaling, like I feel like I gotta, light a candle, I gotta do all this stuff. And I was like, huh. And I asked her, what does that do for you? And she said, it makes me feel cozy and comfortable. And I was like, that's, part of your process. It's okay to have a process. I think what happens is the process interrupts the flow, right? You have too much of a process that you actually never ever get to the thing. And that's what was happening to her. Process on top of process on top of process, but she never got to the thing that she was preparing for. And that's when you sort of have to reel it in, right? All right. So behaviorally, what was I saying? Behaviorally, you begin to structure your life from the inside out. So when we're not chasing purpose, when we're trying to live without striving, right? Anissa said, I just got some index cards in a box because I need easy access to the thing. There you go. Find your process and find your thing, but accept it and then give yourself a time limit when you're over processing, right? So instead of asking, what should I do? Because that's a very mind thing, right? We're in our heads when we ask a question like that. You start asking what feels real for me right now, what feels really authentic for me right now. and what is mine to engage with today. Because what happens, especially if you have partners, you have families, you have kids, we take on a lot of their stuff. And I have a client where he's actually actively experiencing this, and he's so empathetic, to his wife and everything, but he's finding that he's taking a lot of her stuff on. And one of the practices is like just saying, this is not mine to take. It's just not mine. But part of that is him allowing her to go through her own journey without stepping in. And that's very hard for a lot of folks, right? But the more that you meddle in other people's stuff, it prevents you from getting to your own stuff. It's a great distraction because if I'm over here, concerned about other people, I don't need to look at my own stuff, right? I can let time go by. I'm being so helpful, right? But you're also forgetting yourself along the journey. And so when you go through this process behaviorally, you stop needing your actions to justify your time or your worth. You stop building your day around what looks meaningful and start building it around what feels emotionally accurate, not externally validating. And again, emotionally accurate goes back to coherence, alignment, connection. And so you find you might skip the to-do list, right? And you have one quiet, value-based aligned task. This happened to me this week on this past Tuesday. I was really off. Like whenever I come home from being overseas, I always like, oh yeah, this is why I left. But I love my family, but it gets a little heavy. Everybody's kind of going through their own things. And I started, as sort of like an empath, I started to pick up some of this stuff. And I was just like, and I was trying to force myself to kind of do all like work and get, prepare for this live and prepare for other things that I had scheduled. And I was like, you know what? I ain't doing it. I just lay down and just kind of like enjoyed the rest of the day and sat in my feelings, because sometimes that's what you need to do. And you'll go through those waves, right? And it's meeting yourself where you are in that moment and not trying to sort of stuff it with distractions or anything like that. And so you might choose rest over productivity. A lot of people still believe that they need to earn rest instead of just taking it, right? And so you stop believing that you earned it, but because this is what it looks like to be in integrity with self. Okay. And so this is how habits shift. They stop being a tool for self improvement and they start becoming a form of self relationship. How do I become self led? How do I become a leader of self? It's not how I can be better, but how can I stay connected to myself, especially when no one's watching, right? How do I do that? Not to perform, but to just be authentic, to honor like my own truth. Okay. And so if you're in this phase trying to rebuild without slipping back into old habits, I've created a few free tools just to support you. They're there to offer structure without the pressure, just simple practices, reflection prompts, and gentle resets to help you stay connected to yourself while you find the new rhythm. And you could find that in the description below. All right. So when we look at somatically, and this part often gets overlooked, but it's so essential. I actually have a client where um, uh, we do therapy, and sometimes what I'm finding is like for some people, they need to regulate before they talk. You can't even like, you got to regulate first. And it's something that she didn't even realize because it seemed that when she was in previous sessions, therapists would just let her just kind of like just bawl, cry, and just kind of dump. But what she needed was regulation. And so that's what we're just working on. Right. And so some of us, just like the index cards with Anissa, you regulate yourself before you respond to something. And sometimes it does help for it to be calm, but it's also a part that helps your body remember how urgency kept you safe, right? The old way of habits kept you safe and contained in a way that stunted your growth. And so part of this process is to interrupt that loop. So when your system gets activated, when you feel the pull to rush, to fix, explain, over explain in some conditions, or perform, you pause. not to disconnect or disassociate. Sometimes for a lot of us, we kind of like just tune out, but to re-enter the moment with choice. So when we feel, because you can feel it in your body when like there's a rush moment, there's like this overwhelming feeling to do something or to do less of something, but like we call it the sympathetic, where like you're like really just like really down and low in an energy. But it's like, okay, how do I reset in a way that allows me to re-enter this moment consciously, right? And so you begin to use some of these tools, some of these rituals. For some people, it's breath, it's just taking one breath, it's walking, it's stretching, it's grounding. Find whatever anchors you, because you can easily pull for those things in that moment so you don't get trapped in that loop. And it's not about being zen, but it's about just staying inside of yourself, inside of your life without disengaging, disconnecting, to feel yourself here. So your decisions aren't being made from, fear, uh, patterns that you just kind of taken, those habits that you've used over time, or just autopilot, right? And over time, when we do this more and more, and people don't believe me when I say it, but like, because what they're looking for is like this home run that clears everything. So these tiny little practices, I call them micro moves, they help, they compound over time. And so you do it enough times, what happens is you build a nervous system that can tolerate space, that can tolerate uncertainty and embrace internal authority, right? And so when that happens, you stop needing to know what's next because you trust to meet yourself. I mean, you trust yourself to meet whatever arises, whatever challenges come, you just begin to start trust. And that's really how you start to begin to build self trust as well, right? And so, lastly, we'll talk a little bit about spiritually, because when you're asking the question, what is my purpose? It is a spiritual question, it's not a practical question. And so, when you begin the integration process through this way, you stop holding out for the big calling. You stop waiting for life to reveal some grand purpose before you participate in life fully. Instead, you begin to respond to what's already here. I'm sure there's a lot that's going on in a lot of your lives, that things are already kind of happening, but because we're like looking over here somewhere, we don't even notice it. And so, how do we come down and begin to just notice the little things that might be happening in our lives that have been trying to get our attention all along? I think I talked about this in episode 3. When you listen inwardly, you start to hear what life is trying to show you, trying to tell you. It could be like the conversation that you've been avoiding. It could be that desire that you've had for a long time that you've been silencing. It's a step that honors your current reality, not your resume, not your role, not your projections, not any of that stuff. This is where you shift from striving for impact to just living with intimacy with yourself. You begin to trust that your sense of aliveness, your inner pull, and those like tiny little voices of yes that are like popping up, none of that is random, right? It's directional in a sense, not in a branding sense, not, but like in a soul sense. Okay. And over time, when you start listening, we call them breadcrumbs, right? When you, because life leaves clues. You ever heard that phrase? Life leaves breadcrumbs. And sometimes we step over them breadcrumbs. We never look back to see them, those kinds of things. But when you start noticing those breadcrumbs, um, you begin to live differently. And it's not loud, it's not bigger, it's just more authentic to you, right? There's a quote by Howard Thurman. Sure, maybe some of you have heard of it, but don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go and do that. What brings you joy? Do more of that. Uh, for me, it's travel or reading, art, all those things, and I'll do a lot of those things, and that feeds that feeling, that meaning, right? And so, how do we shift the perception what purpose means? How do we redefine it for us versus what we've been conditioned to believe, right? because what the world needs isn't your performance, it's your presence. The world needs your presence. The people around you need your presence. You yourself need your own presence. All right. So we just walked through a lot. Um, we walked through a different way of being, one that's isn't built on around striving, but self compassion, about pacing ourselves. And instead of giving you something else to figure out, I just want to leave you with two questions. All right. Y'all ready for those two questions? I might add them also in the description, maybe in the comments, so that you guys can have them. But what would shift? Question one: what would shift if you no longer needed your actions to prove anything about who you are? There was nothing to prove. What would shift? All right. And the second question: what would help? And what helps you stay connected to what's authentic, especially when there's no outcome attached? And one of those questions might speak to you more than the other, or maybe both speak to you. But, you know, think about that. Let that sit a little bit, right? Not to like look for the answer right away, because sometimes some of us are like, ooh, just let it seed, let it permeate, um, and see what happens. Because change doesn't happen because you finally understand everything. And I'll let you in on a little secret. You ain't ever gonna learn everything, okay? Right? All knowledge, all of that is infinite. And we're not gonna learn everything that we need to learn in this lifetime. And so either for some people that'd be like, "Oof, that's a relief." Others are like, depending on who you are, you're not gonna learn it all. So you might as well just let it go, right? Everything happens through how you relate to the moments that no longer feed your old identity, right? So part of this process is the things that need to let go. And that was episode 3, letting go. If you're in the space between letting go of what no longer fits and learning how to live without chasing, the resistance reset was built for this season. It's not about pushing through, it's about nervous system regulation, values based decisions, and building the kind of self trust that holds steady even when clarity is still forming. And if that feels like the next step, the waitlist is open, or you can start with something simple. You grab the free reflection tools linked below. They're not here to fix anything, they're just here to help you stay with yourself without defaulting back to old patterns. Because what matters is staying connected to what's actually here and having the capacity to meet it without retreating into performance or protection. And so, when you're in the end here, living with purpose isn't about having the right plan, the perfect words, or a passion that makes sense to everyone else. Living with purpose means, how do I live with what's currently in front of me right now? How do I engage with the day to day, moment to moment, the interactions with others, with myself? How do I be as present as I can right now? Because what you're going to find when you just go with the flow with what life is presenting you, it doesn't mean to just be out here just floating around, right? But it means that, oh, I'm going to trust the journey. You're going to find yourself, you're going to wake up one day and be like, oh my God, I'm actually living the thing that I've always wanted to create. I'm actually the person that I've always wanted to become, because you let go of a lot of that. So again, it's about how you relate to your life when things are uncertain, when things are unpolished, and just unfolding in real time. So what we're doing is we're not bypassing what's uncomfortable. We're also not waiting for permission to begin. We're not needing every step to be like this deep, profound experience before we can actually take that first step. We don't need any of that. So when you stop chasing purpose as a destination, because you find that like some people, they're like, I thought this was my purpose, and then they get it and they're like, this ain't it. I thought this was my purpose, and then they get it, this ain't it. And even myself, when I went through this whole journey of like, all I knew, like in high school, I was like, I want to be a psychologist. I went to school, got the bachelor's of psychology. Then I was like, oh no, I'm gonna pivot, I'm gonna do something else. And then I was like, bump this, I ain't doing any of it. I left. Okay. That happens sometimes because sometimes we have this idea of what it needs to be. And because it's not rooted in deep authenticity, we find ourselves at a crossroad. And for me, I was at a crossroad. It wasn't that like I'll be forever in this space because it's just like I ain't gonna be no scientist. I ain't gonna be no mathematician. I ain't getting in no sales. Like that ain't me. There are some things that are innate to us. We all have this unique soul blueprint, all of us. And so it's up to us to discover what that is. And so there are threads and there are themes that are in our lives for a reason. And you'll discover them as you allow yourself to explore and get curious about life. And so I say that to say that it might not look the way that you think it looks, and allow it to show you, allow life to show you what it is. And so even when I left and did something completely different, those threads were still there. You know, I joke around because I did real estate for about 3 years and I wasn't very good at it. Like I was doing okay. You know, I did it full time for 3 years. And I remember the person I used to work was like, Francis, you can't be staying and talking to the clients for as long as you're talking to them for. And that's that's my thing, right? I like to do that. And so you'll see those subtle threads in your own life. And you're like, huh, what has life been trying to show me? Life has been showing me this all along, but what it meant was like it's just gonna look different. And I realized the things that were important to me were freedom, impact, and yeah, freedom to do it the way that I wanted, freedom of expression, and service. And so, as long as those things are present, that makes me feel good. And even then, we can get trapped in that feeling good because if it's not present, then you start feeling bad. So it's like, okay, just being observant of any traps that we might find ourselves. And so it's about just allowing yourself to just flow with how life is unfolding for you and seeing what message is coming in, right? And so when you stop chasing, again, purpose as a destination, you become available to what's already trying to grow through you right here in sort of this ordinary space because clarity doesn't arrive because you figured it all out. Know that you can't figure it all out. All of that emerges because you stayed just with yourself as the things were coming up. You stayed with yourself, you stayed with the process, you stayed present long enough for something deeper to take root. Okay. And that's really the journey. So, no need to chase purpose, no need to have a life plan, and do what feels good. There's a yoga teacher that I follow on YouTube. My name's Adrienne, Yoga with Adrienne, you know her. And she's all about do what feels good. And so I would turn that to say, do what feels authentic. Okay. Do what feels authentic. All right. So if you made it to the end, type not chasing purpose in the comments. And that tells me that you're embracing something different. And that matters. All right. So hopefully, sweating over it. Hopefully this was helpful to y'all. I really appreciate you everyone watching, chatting with me here. I think I'm going to probably do more lives because I actually am running out of time when it comes to editing videos. So I might just be doing lives for the next couple of weeks and we'll see how it goes. Life is one big experiment, y'all. So just get curious, experiment a lot, and you will discover something so, so deep and so authentic. and live life by being curious and see what happens. Right. All right, Toya, I see you. I see you. But yeah, don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, definitely subscribe, hit the like button, show me some love, and I will see y'all next week. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good night. And thank you. And see you on the other side of change. Take care. I'm sweating up like a sweat.